Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop. And on this episode, we're tearing apart a perfectly good T56 transmission. All right, so to give you a little bit of backstory on what's going on here before we jump into the transmission, this is my 1990 C1500 steel cab short bed pickup truck that I built probably two and a half years ago now. I built an LS 408 stroker for it, which I still have, which is going back in it, and that T56 transmission, which was already in this truck as well. In fact, this thing was on the road, it was registered, it was driving, it had a full interior. There's only a few things that I needed to do to get it completely done. But like I do, I get a crazy idea and I'm like, you know what? I want a race truck. Something that's not street legal, track use only, something that I could thrash around on and you know, not really care that much about. So I gutted everything out of it. Why do I want to build a race truck? Well, why not? First of all, do I really need to have a reason? I don't have a good reason for most of the things that I do, so why start now? Anyway, 24 Hours of Lemons is a race series that I've been racing in. I've done 2 races so far. One in Atlanta at Road Atlanta, and the other in South Carolina at Carolina Motorsports Park. And it was the most fun I've ever had on a track. So if you don't know what 24 Hours of Lemons is, I'll leave a link to it right here. Click on that, go check it out. It is so much fun. And that's the real motivation behind wanting to build a Lemons car of my own. Now, if you guys are familiar with Lemons, you're probably looking at this and going, yeah, that's super cheaty. And I admit it is. This isn't a $500 car. Technically, it's free because I already own it, but I don't think that'll get past the judges. So, am I ever going to be competing for a race win? Probably not, but that's not the point. The point is to get out there and have fun with your friends. So, that's why I'm doing it. All right, so what's the matter with this thing? A couple of things. First is the shift from 3 to 4 is super grindy, and I really feel like the synchros are starting to go. And trying to get it into reverse is almost impossible. The synchros are completely shot on that, and it'll pop out of gear when you give it any throttle. So before we made it back behind the 408 back there and throw it in the truck, I just want to go through the whole thing, give it a once over, replace the synchros or anything else in there that is broken before we really beat on it on the racetrack. I am most certainly not a transmission expert. In fact, this is the first transmission I've ever attempted to disassemble. So I have the actual manual from Tremec, how to disassemble and reassemble. It has some pretty good pictures and stuff in it. So I will be going step by step out of this procedure. All right, so the first thing it has you do is put the transmission in neutral between 3rd and 4th gear, which is done. Remove the 4 shifter bolts and remove the shifter, which that is already done. And then next is remove the drain plug and drain all the fluid. Not a whole lot left in there. I think when I removed this from the truck, I may have let most of it drain out of the tail shaft. But there's a little bit left. All right, next up it says we need to remove the roll pin on the extension lever and remove that, and then loosen up the rear tail housing extension bolts, and then remove that while the transmission is horizontal. All right, let's let this thing down as fast as possible. All right, now I'll bring you guys in here so you can see what's going on. All right, so the roll pin that it's talking about is this guy right here. So I need to punch that guy out, and then we can remove the lever linkage here. And that way we can pull the tail housing off past that rod. All right, so just using a drift punch and punch that guy out, and that comes off. Get the roll pin out of there. All right, next up is to remove the tail housing bolts. So these are around this perimeter right here, and they are 15s. They're also on there very tight. Plan B. I don't actually have a plan B. Plan more torque. Nope. All right, with these two 4x4s, should be enough spacing so that the input shaft doesn't hit the floor. I know some of my buddies from work are like, Rich, where did you learn how to rig? Well, the truth is I didn't. All right, well, this should get it. Yep. Yep. All right. I was able to get all the bolts loosened and they are covered in RTV. So this transmission has definitely been opened before, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But all the bolts are out and now we should be able to pull the tail housing off. There it goes. Alrighty. Next, it says to remove or disconnect the ceiling ring, speedometer gear, and speed sensor rotor. Like so. Then, speedometer gear snap ring. Snap ring. Okay. Then, the speedometer gear, which is this guy. Okay, it says for models with plastic speedo gear, it will slide off freely. But this is definitely not a plastic gear. This is a steel gear, so I'm gonna have to get some pullers to pull that guy off. All right. So I got my 2-jaw puller on here, and it's funny, when I went to go tighten it down, like the gear you can see is already coming off. So it's like barely on there. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's coming off by hand. I wonder if I even, nope, still gotta use the puller. All right. So here is the speedo gear. Pretty cool. Just a little reluctor ring. All right, and next is another circlip. All right, so next is this roller bearing snap ring. Okay, and then a spacer. And then a roller bearing. And then another snap ring. Wait, there's another spacer. Oh yeah, roller bearing, spacer. Got it, I can read. Yes. Wow. Yeah, I don't know if you can tell, but the edge of that guy is super destroyed. Thrust washer. It's like suction to the top of this gear. It should come off together. So I'm taking off the thrust washer and the reverse gear. Then a reverse gear caged and needle bearing. This guy. And then a wave washer. This guy. And then a blocker ring. Edges are a little rounded off on the blocking ring, but I'm replacing this guy. All right, so this is the reverse selector And let me get you in here real quick because I think I know where all that metal came from. These edges are supposed to be very, very sharp points, and as you can see, they've all been just mowed down. And I know exactly how that happens because whenever I would try to shift into reverse, so this would come up to engage the reverse gear, which is right here. So to engage these teeth on the reverse gear, it would just grind and grind because there was nothing for those teeth to engage with, since these are all so rounded off. And I'm assuming that that's where most of that metal came from, is from here. And I know that the shift from 3 to 4 kind of does the same thing, so I'm expecting there to be similar damage on that synchro. Like I said before, I'm no transmission expert and I've never taken one apart, so I'm making sure that I'm putting everything in a row exactly how I took it off, so that I know how it goes back together. And luckily I do have the procedure here that has pretty good pictures. Alright, I've swiveled the transmission around so you can kind of get a better vantage point here. But the next step is to remove the synchronizer snap ring, which is this guy right here. Alright, it's about 15 minutes later, but I finally was able to get that circlip off. And here it is right here. You can see by the markings on it that was pressed pretty hard against the top of the synchronizer, which the book said that would be the case. But the crappy thing is whoever put this together last put this circlip in upside down. So it may be hard to see. There is a slight angle on these edges. Let's see if you can see it. There's a slight angle where they taper, and you want that taper to be narrower at the top, so whenever you use your circlip removal tools, it has that edge to grab onto. If it's upside down, you'll never be able to grab it. Your tool just keeps on slipping off, and that's what I've been dealing with this whole time. So when this goes back together, you gotta remember to put in the circlip right side up. Okay, next up is the snap ring on this shift fork. So I use my snap ring pliers. That guy comes up. And now this whole assembly should come out. Shift fork is a little stubborn coming off of this rod. There we go. So that is the reverse shift fork and reverse synchronizer. Oh man. So what I've been told is if you have one side that's all chewed up, on the reverse gear you can just flip it over and use the other side because it's not used. But looks like someone did it already, which would explain all of the metal on these magnets down here. So I'm definitely in it for a new reverse synchronizer for sure, so I'm gonna have to add that to the list. All right guys, well it's several days later. Where did we leave off? Everything having to do with reverse is off, and that came off with no issue. But the next step is getting 5 and 6 cluster gear. These are the driven gears on the output shaft. Getting those off. On all the videos that I've watched, people have been able to just snatch that right out of there with their hands, but I have had no such luck. In fact, I've already gone through 2 different pullers, ratcheting pullers, trying to get this off, and the only thing that I've managed to do is bust half of these teeth off. So I went to Harbor Freight and I bought the 10-ton hydraulic puller, and we're about to see if that gets it to come off the shaft. But with 20,000 pounds of force, something's gonna happen. I'm not taking any chances with this one. All right, here we go. Got the GoPro precariously mounted right in the firing zone. This is gonna be my shield. Hopefully that stops the big stuff anyway. Okay, here we go. I just heard a noise, but I don't know if it's a noise that we want. It's getting very hard to pull down this lever. Oh man, I'm afraid to look at it. Alright, well, what happened? Well, the camera still works. That's good, but it doesn't look like we made any progress. Just looks like the jaw slipped off the gear. Man, this is crazy how hard this is on here. I think I got it. I was jacking with it off camera. I had to grind the teeth down a little bit to get a better bite, or grind the jaws down a little bit to get a better bite around the gear. So I did that and pumped it up, and I think the gear has come up a little bit, but it's definitely fighting me, so let's see if this works. Man, it's still a ton of pressure, but it looks like little by little it's starting to give. It doesn't want to slide up smooth, it wants to come all at once. There we go. Hell yeah. Finally. Oh man, this makes me so happy. I thought for sure I was gonna have to get the cutting wheel out and cut this thing off of here. Man. What a fight that was. That was absolutely welded to the shaft. But it's off. That means we can continue with the disassembly. All right, so that's everything on the main shaft in the tail housing section. So now we're gonna go over to the counter shaft and start working on that. So the first thing you do is take off this snap ring that fits right down in here, but I did that off camera. So that comes off. And then after that, this whole 5th gear, 6th gear, and synchronizer assembly should just come up off of this shifter rail. So let's see if it's gonna do it. You gotta kind of rock it back and forth a little bit to get it to come loose. Here we go. Trying to keep everything together. Alrighty. Keep that together. There's the needle bearing. Is there a spacer? Yep, there's a spacer right there. So that goes all down like that. And I think that's it. So there you have it. The counter shaft with 5th and 6th gear and the synchronizer assembly. Alright, so let's take this counter shaft apart real quick, and I'm trying to give you my perspective here, so hopefully you can see how this comes apart. So first we have this washer. Alright, next up is the 6th gear. Okay. So inside of that it's going to have some needle bearings, so we can put those down. And here you can see the friction surface where the synchronizer friction cones grab to bring the gear up to speed whenever you're making a shift. So I'm looking at the teeth here, and they're a little rounded off, and there's a couple that has some chunks missing out of it. So I'm definitely going to replace this gear. And that was 6th. All right, next is a blocker ring. have a whole new set of blocker rings, so I'll be replacing that too. It came off like that. Let's see. Next is a little washer. We'll take the shift fork off. Oh, that's the whole synchronizer. We're gonna leave that on there, but get the fork out of the way. Oh, there's a snap ring right here. Okay. There's that. And synchronizer comes off. So let's look at the teeth on the synchronizer. Yeah, I know it's kind of hard to tell, but these, you can see that groove in there. So these are chewed up pretty good. And that is the 6th gear side. So this is the 5th gear side. Yeah, and those are rounded off pretty good. So this transmission was definitely beat on a little bit. So that goes down like that. Okay, next up, we have the other blocker ring. It has the cone with the friction material in there, you can see. Just like that. And then we got 5th gear and its needle bearing. Friction surface there. And looking at the teeth. Yeah, 5th gear, at least on the gear side, doesn't look bad. Oh well, there are a couple that have chunks missing out of it. Yeah. Maybe I'll replace that too. Alright, and what we have left is, I think this goes to the idler sprocket in the tail housing, and then a bearing, which we will be removing later. Next up, before we can take this case off, we have to remove this little roll pin in here so that this shift linkage selector thing can come off with the case and right up the shaft. So let's do that. All right, so that's all the way through. And it kind of falls into a little pocket on the back, and you'll be able to get in there and grab it when this whole thing comes off. What's next? So, need to take, I don't know if you can see, it's kind of dark in here, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10 bolts that are holding the mid case to the adapter plate. So we got to take all those out, but I'm going to leave a couple in there because I got to set this back up vertical again. All right, I took the tail housing off so you can kind of see a little bit better what's going on in here. But I'm just taking off these 10 bolts that hold the adapter plate to the mid case. The next things that are going to come off are these two Torx head bolts, and those are the shift reel alignment pins. It's a T40, by the way. And the next thing is to pull the mid case off of the adapter plate. But when you do it, you have to make sure that this guy comes up with it too. And there is a spring with a detent ball that's in the very back of this that it's going to pop out whenever this case comes up. So you just want to make sure that you have your hand there to catch it, because you're going to need that whenever this goes back together. For those of you that were paying attention, I definitely missed one of the bolts holding the mid case to the adapter plate. So there are 11 total, not 10. That's out now. Now we're going to try to pry the mid case off of the adapter plate. There's a couple little spots where you can pry. So that's loose. That's loose. All right, looks like it should come off. Oh, there goes the spring in the detent ball. All right, and that's the mid case off. All right, so here's the shifter linkage, and on the back side, you can see it has this little spring and this little detent ball that sits in that spring. And that's what actually determines your shift pattern on the transmission. It doesn't let you overshift. And here's the roll pin that we beat out earlier. So make sure you don't lose any of those things. Next up is rotate 5th and 6th reversed shift rail levers off of shift interlock plate. Okay, so that's this guy right here. Just gonna rotate this out like so. I guess this in here is the shift interlock plate. And then remove it. So it should pop right out. Sweet. Next up is remove the counter shaft, which is this guy. So it says to kind of lift up and lean over the main shaft to get this guy off. Okay, a little fidgety. Here we go. There's the counter shaft. Couple of tapered roller bearings on both ends of that. All right, and then it says you can remove the main shaft. This thing's pretty heavy. All right, main shaft. Okay, so here we have the main shaft. So let's see, this should be 1st and 2nd gear. This is 3rd gear, and 4th gear on a T56 6-speed is a 1-to-1 ratio, so it's actually on the input shaft, so it just locks the input shaft to the output shaft. Cool, so let's take this thing apart. So the first thing is there's a little rubber O-ring. There's a little groove that it sits in. Come on, there we go. Okay, and this taper bearing should just kind of come off of here. Of course, with my luck so far on this transmission, that may not be the case. Well, with a lot of patience and a lot of love from the hammer, I was able to get this bearing off, but that was another fight. So that came off that way. Like that. Obviously that will be getting replaced. Moving on. So we have 1st gear next. Come on. There we go. So 1st gear is going to come off with its needle bearings. So looking at the teeth for 1st gear. Yeah, this actually looks really good. Looks like I'm not going to need to replace 1st gear at all, which makes sense because, you know, you're not really moving. You're not doing a whole lot of downshifting into 1st gear anyway. Cool. So that came off like that. First bit of good news, not going to have to replace 1st gear. Sweet. All right, so we got a snap ring, and then looks like a thrust washer, and then the synchronizer stuff. Get my snap ring pliers. All right. Snap ring off. Okay, so we got a few different pieces here. Make sure. All right, and all these pieces interlock together. So this actually has teeth on it that engage the shaft. Then you have your friction surface that engages that. So this is always spinning, as long as the shaft is spinning. Then you have a friction cone that has friction material on the inside and the outside. Okay. And then you have the blocker ring. Cool, so all this can free spin until you go to shift into, so this would be first gear. You shift this into first, it engages these teeth, and then it puts pressure on that friction material, and as the shaft is spinning, it gets first gear up to speed before it locks in. So that's pretty cool. So let me make sure this comes off the right way. The inner one, outer one. I'm actually just gonna stack it up. Takes up less space. This is gonna get replaced, the friction material and the blocker ring is gonna get replaced. Cool. All right, now it should be the synchro. So what happened is the little locking tabs in the spring washer popped out. So it's part of the synchro. Let's get the rest of it. Oh, is that pressed on? All right, well, we got to figure out how to get this part off. So let me think about that for a second. With a little help from the hammer again, I was able to get that center hub out of there. So I put the center hub back into the synchro ring, and I put the keepers and the springs back in. So looking at this synchro, the teeth look pretty good on one side and pretty crappy on the other. So I'm guessing the good side would be what engaged with first gear, and the power shifting into second kind of chewed up the teeth on the other side. So we're gonna need to replace that for sure. All right, so next is gonna be the blocking ring and the friction cone, and then another friction surface, and then the other lock that locks the synchro to the shaft. Sweet. So what is next? I bring us back over. So I think I want to say, so what this will be second gear. This should come up. Yeah. Okay, second gear. Let's look at the teeth on this guy. Yeah, these are rounded off. A little bit too much power shifting. They have the needle bearings. Actually, that should be going like this. Yeah, okay. And then this part right here is actual part of the shaft. So the third gear and everything slides off that direction. So we're going to stack this up the opposite way. Okay, so it looks like this is going to fight us. So like this one, I may just have to take the outer ring off and then use a hammer and a punch to get this, the inner part of the synchro off. So I'm going to take the spring out. I should be able to pull this forward, and the other spring is probably going to pop out. Yeah, third and fourth, they're all chewed up too, so I'm going to have to replace this with the keepers. Normally you would want this whole assembly just to come off, but oh, well, of course it's not going to come off. There's a snap ring right there that is also put on backwards. Oh man, this is going to be a fight. Whoever rebuilt this transmission before me made a number of mistakes. Okay, let's see how much of a pain in the ass this is going to be. It's having a little trouble getting the third and fourth synchro assembly off. It's kind of stuck on these threads right here, so I put it in the press. And we're going to press third gear off and the synchro off at the same time. Here we go. And there it goes. Sweet. I forgot to mention I was able to get that snap ring off when I was fighting with earlier. Alright, so now everything can come off. So we have the synchro center hub that goes back into the ring assembly. Get those lined up. And then these springs and keepers go on this guy. I guess I could show you how that goes together real quick. Okay, let me line that back up. Yep, so you have your little keepers. And there's these 3 slots that they fit into. And then you have these little spring assemblies that clip onto the inside of those keepers. Oops. Sweet. Alright, so that is your synchro. So that goes there. This is your friction surface, your blocker ring. It's there. And then third gear. How does third gear look? Yeah, it's pretty chewed up. And you have a little plastic spacer and your needle bearing. And that is it. Completely disassembled main shaft. Alrighty, the last little piece of this puzzle is fourth gear, which is coupled to the input shaft on the transmission. So we can just pull that guy right out. Set it down over here, and here's the other part of the synchro with the friction surface. And that's it, the gear and a roller bearing. She's fully apart. finally, it only took me 5 days, but we got it done. All right, guys, we got some bad weather rolling in, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this video up right here since we're done with the disassembly. So I got some parts to order, and as soon as those come in, we'll start with the reassembly video. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.